All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about some recent things that are happening in the world of Floyd Mayweather Jr., some accusations being made by Logan Paul, accusations being made by Adrein Broner, and a whole bunch of people thinking that it means something that it probably does not. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about Floyd Mayweather Jr. and accusations, or actually the likelihood that he may be sued by Logan Paul, and accusations that were made by Adrein Broner and also someone else connected to Floyd Mayweather Jr. that actually took him to court. Whole lot of people coming by my comment sections in the live streams talking about Floyd is broke, PBC is broke, the usual stuff, but we'll talk about that in this video. But before I do, thank you so much for watching the video, watching another video on the channel. Make sure if you're not subscribed to the channel that you hit the subscribe button, you hit the bell icon, and hit all notifications so you can be notified when we release more videos. All right, so here you go. We got 3 separate instances on Floyd Mayweather Jr. right now related to non-payment, underpayment, or something like that. And as a result, a lot of people are saying that Floyd Mayweather Jr., once again, making the claim that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is broke, the PBC is broke, they're not going to be in business in 6 months, the whole 9 yards, right? But in all fairness, we can look at what things have been said and what the circumstance is okay? So first and foremost, you have Adrein Broner, who took to social media, or was interviewed, and he was talking about the PBC and how the PBC was messing over fighters, how the PBC was only paying guys like $1 million for a fight, and then pretty much having everything else that they're paid basically be coming out of the pay-per-views, but that nobody is buying the pay-per-views, and as a result, his guys or other fighters that are with the PBC, and I suppose Mayweather Promotions, he wasn't clear, but somehow it's being dumped on Floyd. That somehow means that these guys are going to go broke and they're going out of business. That's one. The second is an actual lawsuit that has been filed by a guy, Yogi Securities, that invested in a certain amount of money to buy tickets for the Floyd Mayweather Jr. Logan Paul fight. And he is claiming that although they sold the tickets, he did not get compensated for his investment, and he's suing those guys for breach of contract. Floyd Mayweather Jr., Floyd Mayweather Promotions, Al Heyman, and a bunch of other guys. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is you have Logan Paul. Is that right? Logan Paul. I mix up Jake Paul and Logan Paul sometimes because they're both guys that I don't care about seeing fight. But Logan Paul is saying that he is considering suing Floyd Mayweather Jr. because he has not been paid for the pay-per-view fight that he had with Floyd Mayweather Jr. Right? So all of those together mean that Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself is going broke. First and foremost, Floyd Mayweather Jr. is not the PBC in and of himself. Okay? So Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself personally probably is not responsible for paying. Adrein Broner is not himself responsible for paying other fighters that are at the PBC, or even Floyd or even Mayweather Promotions. Mayweather Promotions, I suspect, is incorporated, and it is its own company in and of itself. So there is, when you have a corporation, some protection between the owners of the corporation and the debtors or the creditors of that company, right? Now, I'm not sure what the financial makeup of it is, whether they're an LLC, whether they're an Inc., whether they what they are. However, if it is Floyd Mayweather, if it's Mayweather Promotions Incorporated, and it is a full corporation, he will have different partners in that, and he will be shielded from his own, to a certain extent. He will be have his own personal assets shielded from whatever creditors Mayweather Promotion has. Kind of like if you are a stockholder or a partial owner in IBM. If IBM goes broke or if somebody sues IBM, you are not personally held responsible for the money for that unless there's some reason to connect you and they name you as an individual for some reason. So first and foremost, if the PBC was going broke or Floyd Mayweather Promotions was going broke, that does not mean Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going broke. He's not paying bills out of his pocket for those companies. All right, so that's first and foremost. And that goes specifically for what was happening as far as the guy that said that is suing those guys, saying that they did not get compensated for some tickets that were sold and they were resell and they got resold, but they didn't get the money that they were promised out of that breach of contract thing. That they are not suing Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself personally from there. That is some room in between the two. Now, as far as Adrein Broner goes, though, that's just Adrein Broner complaining about how much money somebody's getting paid. That's not saying that Floyd Mayweather Jr. can't pay his bills. So when you guys come and ask me about those type of things, it's like, man, just make sure that you actually read and understand what it is to the extent that you can. Read and understand what is actually going on and what they're actually saying and what they're accusing him of. Nobody is saying, Adrein Broner, first of all, was talking about the PBC. He did not say Floyd Mayweather Jr. was not paying his bills to fighters. What he said was that they are not paying these guys a lot of fights, a lot of money. They're paying them $1 million for a fight. And then the majority of the rest of their money, they're relying on the pay-per-views. And then that the pay-per-views are not selling. That is not saying that Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Mayweather Promotions or the PBC are not meeting the obligations that they have to fighters, right? And again, with the other two, that does not mean that Floyd Mayweather himself is responsible for paying those things. Now, could there be some problems going on in the PBC with their financials or the Mayweather Promotions with their financial situation? There certainly could be. I don't know enough to say that there is. I don't know enough to say that there's not. However, I will say that if that's the case, it's no different than it is with a lot of businesses when you're going through pretty much an unofficial recession in the United States, and with this COVID and all that stuff going on, and fight dates being moved here and there, for large period of times. They had fights where they couldn't actually have a lot of people in in attendance. So a lot of people that businesses are having a hard time. However, that does not mean that Floyd Mayweather Jr. himself is going broke. That is just, honestly, I think that's a little bit silly. It seems to me like the man has made more than enough money where he is never going to be broke again. Similar to what I've heard like people say about Allen Iverson and how Allen Iverson's broke. It's mighty funny that Allen Iverson's been going broke for the last 20 years, but I still keep seeing this dude driving around in Maybachs. He may, or Tyson, or Mike Tyson is another example of that. Mike Tyson went broke. Mike Tyson, because Mike Tyson made whatever, I don't know how much he made. Say he made $500 million in his career, and he only has 30 now. That is far, far, far from being broke. Okay, the man was a multimillionaire and ain't never going to be starving for another thing. Same thing with Floyd Mayweather Jr. That dude ain't remotely close to being broke anywhere like a normal human being would be close to broke. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that root and cheer for the PBC to fail. A lot of people that root and cheer for Floyd Mayweather Jr. to go broke and not be the money man and all that. However, if I was you, I would not hold my breath. These particular instances that are going on do not sound like they're personally connected to Floyd Mayweather Jr. And if Logan Paul says he may consider suing because he's not been paid, all right, if he sues, then we'll know. But up until now, he has not done so. And we'll see with the situation that kind of, how that pans out. But anyway, that's wanted to give you my 2 cents on that, because people keep coming by the chat, keep asking about it, leaving comments in the comment section and all that good stuff. I think you guys are just making a mountain out of a molehill. There may be some disgruntled people out here with this business transaction or that business transaction. But until they stop making the PBC, specifically the PBC, stops making offers for like $45 million to get Canelo Alvarez to fight Jermall Charlo, I'm not going to believe these guys do not have the wherewithal to put on other fights. Until Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Gervonta Tank Davis and the people that are promoted by them are no longer being able to put on fights, and they got to start selling fighters like other promotional companies had to do. Because there are some promotional companies that have been in some hard way, and you don't really hear about them putting on fights. That's when you know that they got problems, when they're not putting on fights. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.